So we've seen that there are many different sources of innovation, many possible starting points for our innovation journey to create value. That's the good news, lots of opportunities. But it's also a problem. Because there we have all these different opportunities, where do we begin our search? We can't search everywhere, we can't look high and low, we've got limited resources. That's especially true for a small or a startup firm. So we've got limited resources, how might we organize our search for innovation opportunities? That's the subject of this film, and in particular, we're going to look at a number of frameworks to help guide our search. So we're going to be looking at 4 strategic approaches to this question of how do we search for innovation opportunities. The first is an old friend. The 4 Ps, the innovation compass, which gives us some sense of the space and the direction in which we might explore. Second thing we're going to look at is the idea of different lenses, from looking locally at what we do in our core through to the edge of where we operate, and beyond that. The third thing we're going to look at is the idea of time horizons, looking at the here and now and the immediate future right through to the far distant future. And lastly, we're going to look at the interesting but challenging question of what do we do when we have to search beyond the lamppost. So let's remind ourselves of the 4 Ps innovation compass as a framework to help us guide our search. It's a very simple model, but it gives us some sense of exploring the different directions in which we might innovate. We can innovate in terms of what we offer the world, our products or our services. We can innovate in our processes, the ways we create and deliver those offerings. We can innovate in terms of the context we place them in, the positioning of our innovation, new markets, new stories we tell about those products and services. And we can innovate in terms of our paradigm, the way we think about who we are, the way we define the kind of organization we are. Lots of space for innovation. And one very important principle within that we've seen many times in this course, the idea of innovation being a spectrum of novelty, from doing what we do better, incremental change, right the way across to doing something perhaps completely different, radical innovation. So we have this possibility of an innovation space defined by 4 Ps in terms of the directions and the spectrum of possibilities from incremental through to radical. Now, the 4 Ps compass helps us in terms of giving us some guidance as to the directions we might look in our search for innovation opportunities. But we still have the problem that we can't focus all our attention everywhere. So maybe we also need another framework which is all about different lenses, different ways of looking. We might spend quite a lot of our time looking, like with a magnifying glass, close to home, close to our core. What do we currently do? Where are the opportunities there for innovation? We might spend some of our time with a telescope, looking in the middle distance, looking over the edges of our core to where else we might play in adjacent, nearby territory. And we might also think about a big radio telescope or something that's designed to look at the stars and try and find distant possibilities. Now, clearly, we don't want to spend all our time gazing at the stars, but if we don't spend any time, we might run the risk of being rather short-sighted and surprised by innovation coming from an unexpected direction. Now, let's try and look at this in the context of a real example. The German company Hella is a very famous and very successful business, well over 100 years old, and essentially offering products and services in the field of automotive accessories. They're famous for their headlights, which is how the company began, but they're very active these days in automotive electronics. Now, they're a company that absolutely explore their innovation opportunities in terms of the 4 Ps, constantly researching for new products and services, constantly updating their processes, constantly looking for new market positions, particularly spreading their net internationally, and rethinking the paradigm of the company. So they use the 4 Ps of the innovation compass. But they also focus their extensive innovation efforts, and they spend about 10% of their resources on innovation. But they use those resources carefully, and they're very conscious of needing different lenses, the magnifying glass, the telescope, and the radio telescope. So they spend a lot of time focusing on their core business, as you'd expect, the business of automotive electronics and automotive lighting, but they're also looking beyond that to different industries which may also have lighting needs or electronic needs, and beginning to think about completely new business models distant into the future. Now, as well as looking in different directions and looking with different lenses, our magnifying glass looking around our core, our telescope looking at adjacent possibilities, and reaching for the stars with perhaps a radio telescope, as well as these approaches to searching, we also need to bring in the element of time. We need to spend quite a lot of time looking at the immediate future, because that's what's going to support the business and keep the organization alive. But we also need to look for innovation opportunities in the medium term, maybe 5 years out from now. And we need to be looking far into the distance, 20, 30, 40 years ahead. Particularly if we think of some innovation decisions we might need to take, for example, getting into a new technology field, this doesn't happen overnight. We need to allow some time. So in order to exploit those opportunities, we first need to be searching into that far distant future. Now again, let's look at our example of Hella. Not surprisingly, a lot of what it spends its R&D, its innovation budget on, is on near future stuff. What is currently happening, what is happening in the short to medium term, what's going to keep the business going, of course. Beyond that, it does need to look ahead. 5 years or so, what are the new regulations which might be coming in? Particularly in a world of driverless cars, that's all beginning to become important. For example, what's going to happen if we have regulations 5 years from now which say there will be no more internal combustion engine cars? What will that mean in terms of innovation opportunities? That needs to be part of their thinking. And of course, they need a long-term future. What new technologies, what new conditions might exist? We may have very different mobility solutions in the future. In Hella's case, there's a bit of history. Back in 1980, it began to look as if electronics could be an important technology. And Hella were looking far enough ahead to see that possibility and made a strategic innovation decision to invest in electronics. An expensive, could be risky investment, but it's paid off. 40 years later, Hella's income, Hella's business is hugely dependent on its electronics division. Not an accident, it's the consequence of having an approach to searching for innovation which includes near, medium and long-term horizons in terms of time. So by now we've got quite a coherent set of approaches to help us with this question of how do we search for innovation opportunities. 4 Ps to look at different directions, different focus in terms of our lenses from the local through to the distant, and different time horizons. But there's one other challenge which we need to bear in mind. Let me tell you a little story. You imagine that you've come out of the pub and you see a character who's obviously looking very upset, but he's also very drunk. So he's hanging on a lamppost, scrabbling all over the ground, crying his eyes out. Very, very upset. Now, you're a kind person, so you look at him and you say, "What on earth's the matter? Why are you crying? Life can't be that hard. What's the problem?" And he hangs on his lamppost and he says, "I've lost my keys. I don't know what I'm going to do. I've lost my keys. My wife will kill me." "It's all right. I'll help you. This can't be that bad. Now, where did you last see your keys?" And he hangs on his lamppost, stops scrabbling for a moment and points into the distance. "Oh, they're over there." And over there is a car park, all in darkness. Now, at this point, you're beginning to wonder. So, just excuse me, if the keys are over there in the car park, why are you looking here under this lamppost? "Because there's more light here." It's a terrible joke, and I tell it badly. But there's a powerful metaphor here that we need to think about. For smart organizations, people like Hella, the lamppost area is well covered. They know how to search there. What we call the selection environment, the place where we get the trigger signals for innovation, is well covered. They know which technologies to watch. They know which markets to look at. They know which competitors to keep their eye on. They've got that area well covered. But like our drunk with his keys, it's actually not there that the real things are going to be found. They're over there somewhere in the darkness. So we've got to add to our innovation search strategies some way of looking in the darkness as well as under the lamppost. Now you take a company like Hella again, and it's very much in this space. Almost all its efforts are concentrated working very effectively underneath its lamppost. But they also have recognized, particularly in the kind of world they're in, that there are very different things happening. New technologies, new mobility solutions, all sorts of things might emerge into the future that would require a very different approach, which may represent huge new opportunities. So they've begun thinking of working out in the darkness. In particular, they've set up 3 very different laboratories, 3 different zones, one in Berlin, one in Silicon Valley, and one in China, where the idea is to work in new markets, in new contexts, with new technologies, building very different innovation possibilities, searching for them in a much more open-ended way. Not as the only thing they do, but as part of a balanced search strategy. So to summarize, we know there are multiple sources of innovation, but we can't search everywhere. We need a strategic framework or frameworks to help guide our search. There are several possible aids to this. For example, the 4Ps Innovation Compass. We can look through different lenses at the core, at adjacent, and at peripheral worlds. We can look through different time horizons, from the here and now to the medium-term future through to the long term. And we can look under our established lamppost and make sure we also look in areas that have new frames around them. Now, let's pause for a moment and think about all of that.